There was a time I believed I was productive. I checked off tasks. I answered emails quickly. I responded to every ping, every call, every urgent little thing that begged for my attention. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. My days were full but hollow. I was busy but not focused. I was moving but not progressing. I couldn't sit for longer than 10 minutes without switching tabs, checking my phone, or refreshing my inbox. I wasn't lazy. I wasn't unmotivated. But I was scattered. And slowly, it was killing my clarity. The truth is, I wasn't actually doing deep work. I was skimming life. Everything I touched, every project, every idea, every moment of silence was interrupted by something else. I told myself I was multitasking. I wore it like a badge, but what I was really doing was fragmenting my mind, minute by minute, habit by habit. I tried the usual fixes, to-do lists, time blocking, Pomodoro timers. None of it stuck. My problem wasn't about managing time. It was about managing attention. And I had lost mine. Then I came across a simple idea. The 1-hour rule. It wasn't revolutionary. It wasn't even complicated. The rule was this: every day, dedicate one full, uninterrupted hour to one thing that matters. No distractions, no multitasking, no checking messages, just one deep hour, fully committed to a single, meaningful task. I was skeptical. Just 1 hour? That's not much. But then again, when was the last time I worked for an entire hour without interruption? The idea kept tugging at me. It didn't demand a lifestyle overhaul. It didn't require waking up at 5 a.m. or installing new software. It was just 1 hour. One honest hour. And I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, that's what I needed. Not more time, but more depth. So I made a decision. For the next 30 days, I would follow the 1-hour rule. I didn't set massive goals. I didn't declare it publicly. I just opened my calendar, blocked off a recurring hour each morning, and wrote 2 words in the box: deep work. The first day came. I sat at my desk, closed my browser, put my phone on airplane mode, and told myself, just 1 hour. That's all. 5 minutes in, I was already reaching for my phone. My brain resisted the silence. I was used to noise. Background tabs, Slack notifications, the low hum of passive stimulation. Without it, I felt exposed, naked, like I was forgetting something. I kept glancing at the clock, expecting the hour to pass faster. It didn't. I tried writing. My thoughts wouldn't settle. I opened a document. I reread the same paragraph 4 times. I walked in circles. I stared out the window. The quiet felt foreign and loud, but I stayed. I didn't leave the hour. I didn't let myself quit early. I sat in the discomfort. I let it stretch, and somewhere around the 35-minute mark, something softened. My breathing slowed. My focus sharpened. Just a little. I wrote a paragraph, then another. Not perfect, not profound, but real, honest. When the hour ended, I stood up. I hadn't changed the world. I hadn't finished anything. But I felt calm, grounded, clearer than I had in weeks. The next day was harder. My schedule fought back. A call wanted to be squeezed into the hour. A friend messaged me mid-morning. An idea popped into my head and demanded attention. But I remembered the rule. One thing, 1 hour, that's all. I showed up again. This time I wrote on a sticky note. 1 hour is not about the task. It's about who I become by honoring it. That helped. I started to notice something else. The resistance I felt wasn't about the work. It was about being alone with myself. With no stimulation, no quick dopamine hits, no distractions to hide behind. This was why the 1-hour rule mattered. It wasn't about productivity. It was about presence. By day 3, I created a little ritual. I brewed a cup of tea. I turned off all notifications. I lit a candle. I opened the same document. I set a timer. I breathed. It was still hard. My mind still wandered. But each day I returned, the wandering shortened. The space deepened. I began choosing one focus per day, not 5, not a dozen, just one. Write, read, strategize, learn, think. One thing that mattered. And for that hour, it was the only thing in the world. I started to respect the hour, not just as time, but as territory. Sacred territory. A place where the shallow couldn't follow. People asked, "Aren't you behind on everything else?" But the truth was, I was ahead for the first time in years. Because clarity isn't about doing more. It's about doing what matters, fully. The 1-hour rule didn't give me more time. It gave me something rarer. It gave me myself back. The first week nearly broke me. Not because I was too busy, not because I lacked time, but because sitting with one thing for an entire hour felt like dragging my brain through mud. On day 4, I almost didn't do it. I had slept poorly. My to-do list was bursting. There were 3 emails marked urgent that weren't really urgent, but felt like they couldn't wait. I stared at my calendar. The hour block was there, staring back at me, like a quiet promise I didn't want to keep. I almost deleted it, but I didn't. I showed up. And for the first 15 minutes, I did absolutely nothing useful. My mind spun in 10 directions. I kept glancing at the time. The inner voice grew louder. This is a waste. You're not doing anything. There's real work to do. But I stayed. I stared at the screen. I scribbled a few words. I reread notes. It didn't matter what I accomplished. What mattered was that I stayed in the hour. That became the rule within the rule. You don't have to be brilliant. You just have to stay. By day 5, I started tracking how often I got the urge to quit midway. I kept a tally in the margins of my notebook, a little hash mark every time I thought I should check email, or this can wait, or this is boring. That day, I hit 12 marks, but I didn't stop. Somewhere around the 40-minute mark, something loosened. My mind settled. Words began to flow. I wasn't distracted anymore, not because I tried harder, but because the noise had burned off. That's when I learned. Focus isn't a force. It's a residue. It arrives when you let everything else fall away. Day 6 was different. I woke up dreading the hour, not because of the work, but because I didn't feel ready. I told myself, what's the point of doing it if I'm not in the right headspace? But I did it anyway. I opened my laptop. I opened a blank document. I started typing. It wasn't gold, but it was honest. That was another lesson. The hour isn't about inspiration. It's about integrity. By the end of the hour, I had written 800 words of raw, unfiltered thought. I didn't judge them. I didn't edit. I just let them be. When I read them back the next day, I saw something surprising. Insight. Clarity. A thread I hadn't noticed while writing. The ideas had brewed in the background. I just needed stillness to find them. Day 7 came with temptation. It was a Sunday. I usually gave myself full freedom on weekends. Rest, spontaneity, no schedules. But I told myself, if this habit is real, it must survive my most casual day. So I honored the hour. I didn't sit at a desk. I took my notebook to the park. I put my phone in airplane mode. I sat under a tree and let my thoughts out. That hour became the best one of the entire week. No deadline, no pressure, just reflection. I wrote, "I didn't know how distracted I was until I sat in silence. I didn't know how much noise I had internalized. I didn't know how good it could feel to be fully present." 7 days, 7 hours of deep, undisturbed presence. No, I hadn't written a book. I hadn't launched a company. I hadn't achieved anything spectacular. But I had done something more rare. I had reclaimed space in my own mind. And slowly, that space began to change me. By day 8, something had shifted. I no longer felt like I was forcing myself into the hour. I was entering it. The hesitation that marked the first week, the glancing at clocks, the constant mental tug-of-war, had softened. The hour had stopped feeling like a challenge. It had started to feel like shelter. That was unexpected. I hadn't planned for it to feel good. I only hoped it would be useful. But what I found, somewhere between day 8 and day 16, was something more subtle. Peace. There was something comforting about the ritual. I would make my tea, place my phone in a drawer, close the unnecessary tabs, and take a breath before beginning. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't elaborate, but it felt like I was returning to something, like I was stepping back into myself, the part that didn't need to perform, respond, or rush. That hour became my favorite part of the day. It was the one place where nothing was expected of me except my full attention. And in that quiet commitment, I began to uncover things I'd been too busy to see. Thoughts I'd ignored, ideas I'd buried, projects I'd abandoned. One day, around day 10, I picked up an outline for a personal project I'd given up on months earlier. In that hour, with no pressure to finish or impress, I started shaping it again, slowly, gently, with presence. It felt good to return. Not because of the outcome, but because I finally had the mental space to care. That's when I realized the 1-hour rule wasn't just helping me focus. It was restoring my capacity to feel connected. To my work, yes, but also to myself. There's a kind of quiet joy in undistracted attention. A satisfaction that's deeper than checking things off a list. I found myself thinking more clearly after each session. I started noticing things during the rest of the day. Patterns in how I thought, how I reacted, how often I reached for distractions out of habit rather than need. My brain was slowing down in the best way possible. It wasn't sluggish. It was intentional. And it showed up in how I moved through the world. Conversations felt fuller. I was more present when listening. I didn't interrupt as often. I paused before responding. It was as if the stillness I practiced for 1 hour was bleeding into the other 23. That effect surprised me the most. I thought I was building discipline. But what I was really building was depth. On day 13, I wrote in my journal, "This hour is not just about doing deep work. It's about becoming someone who seeks depth in work, in thought, in life." I reread that sentence a few times. It felt important, because what I had been chasing before, productivity, efficiency, output, was all external. This was different. This was internal reorientation. A reconfiguring of how I saw time, how I respected focus, how I related to silence. By now, I didn't need reminders to begin the hour. It had become automatic, a rhythm my mind leaned into. And interestingly, I noticed I was starting to design the rest of my day around it. I didn't want to schedule calls right after the hour. I wanted to protect the clarity I felt. I started grouping shallow tasks later in the day, after the deep work had been done. I was reorganizing my schedule, not based on urgency, but on energy. That was new for me. Before, everything felt like a fire to be put out. Now, I felt more like a builder, placing stones carefully, not rushing to patch holes. That week, I also noticed something I hadn't expected. I was getting more done. Not just in that hour, in the entire day. Because starting with one clear hour seemed to prime my mind for clarity elsewhere. I didn't bounce around as much. I wasn't paralyzed by choice. I had already proven to myself, first thing in the morning, that I could focus. That momentum carried. And I didn't need willpower anymore. What once felt difficult, turning off distractions, ignoring pings, staying with one task, now felt normal, even natural. Because my brain had started to trust that nothing urgent was more important than the deep. That trust was everything. It's what kept me grounded when life outside the hour got noisy, when emails piled up, when unexpected tasks appeared, when energy dipped. I had a center to return to. That center was built, slowly, hour by hour, across those 8 days. And by the end of day 16, I wasn't just practicing focus. I was becoming someone who valued it. By day 17, something remarkable had happened. The 1 hour rule had stopped being a productivity hack. It had become a ritual. I no longer looked at it as a challenge to complete. I didn't dread it, didn't resist it, didn't feel like I had to prove anything. Instead, I anticipated it, the way someone looks forward to their first cup of coffee, or the silence of a slow morning. This hour, it wasn't about output anymore. It was about orientation. It was about how I wanted to meet the day, not rushing into the chaos, but entering from a place of stillness, from a place of intent. I started doing the hour first thing in the morning. No emails, no scrolling, no news. Just wake, drink water, light stretch, and begin. And let me tell you, starting the day with clarity instead of consumption changes everything. Because the first thing you give your attention to often sets the emotional tone for the entire day. And for the past 17 mornings, I had been giving that attention to something deliberate, undivided, fully mine. At first, I worried it would make me fall behind. I wasn't plugged in until later. I didn't respond immediately to anything. But what actually happened was the opposite. I moved faster after the hour. Not chaotically, just fluidly, smoothly. I didn't waste time switching gears. I didn't second guess as much. I had already done the hard part. I had shown up for the important thing. And that made me respect the rest of my time more. I began making choices more intentionally, not just about work, but about how I spent energy. Conversations, meals, exercise, breaks. I was less reactive, more present, less tempted to multitask, more committed to depth. It was as if that single hour in the morning wasn't just shaping my calendar, it was shaping my identity. I was becoming the kind of person who prioritizes depth over noise. It showed up in my writing. I was writing fewer words, but better ones. It showed up in meetings. I listened more, spoke less, asked sharper questions. It showed up in my evenings when I felt less drained, less foggy, more satisfied, even if I hadn't done it all, because I had done what mattered. And somewhere in the quiet of that daily hour, I began to meet a different version of myself. A version I hadn't seen in a long time. A version that didn't rely on urgency to feel valuable. A version that didn't mistake busyness for progress. A version that could be fully present with one task, one thought, one sentence, and feel whole. It wasn't always smooth. there were still days when I struggled. Day 19. I sat in silence for 20 minutes before writing a single word. Day 22. I kept thinking about something I'd forgotten to do, mentally rehearsing how I'd fix it after the hour ended. Day 24. I felt emotionally off, restless, distracted, heavy, and the hour felt longer than usual. But here's the difference. I didn't flee. I didn't abandon the hour because it was hard. I stayed because I had learned the difference between being uncomfortable and being incapable. That's a powerful distinction. I used to think that if something didn't feel good, it meant I was doing it wrong. Now I see that sometimes the discomfort is part of the work, part of the healing even. Because silence reveals things we've buried under speed. Stillness brings up questions we've avoided by staying productive. And the hour is long enough to let those things surface, but short enough to make them manageable. I started jotting down thoughts at the end of each hour. Not just what I did, but what I felt. Patterns emerged. I saw how my emotional state influenced the quality of my work. I saw how certain topics made me anxious. I saw how clarity often arrived in the final 15 minutes, not the first. It was never about perfect focus. It was about honest presence. And the hour gave me room to practice that honesty. By day 25, I realized I no longer thought of the 1-hour rule as a time constraint. I thought of it as a container, a sacred space I had carved out of the chaos. And that changed the way I treated it. I didn't rush into it. I entered with intention. I lit a candle some mornings. I played ambient music. I placed a warm drink beside me like a signal. This time is not like the rest. It wasn't dramatic. It was personal, private, quiet, sacred. That's the word I kept returning to, sacred. Because there's something sacred about giving yourself fully to one thing, even for a short while. In a world that profits from your distraction, choosing focus is an act of rebellion. Choosing stillness is radical. Choosing depth is rare. And yet, it felt natural now. Like this is how we were meant to operate all along, not chasing a dozen things at once, but giving ourselves fully to one moment, one thought, one act. This was no longer just an experiment in focus. It was becoming a philosophy. One that asked me gently but firmly, what would your life look like if you treated more of it with this level of attention? Day 30 came quietly. No celebration, no grand realization, no cinematic moment where I leapt from my chair and shouted, "I've changed!" It was just another morning. The same candle lit, the same notebook open, the same quiet hour. One more in a growing string of mornings that had, without my noticing, become a way of life. But as I sat down, I felt it. The difference. Not in the work itself, but in the way I arrived to do it. I no longer questioned whether I had time. I no longer negotiated with myself. I simply began. And in that simplicity, I found a kind of power I hadn't known I was missing. Because here's the truth. I didn't become a different person overnight. I didn't suddenly achieve superhuman discipline. But what changed, quietly, steadily, unshakably, was my relationship with attention. I started the month believing my attention was fragile. Now, I knew it was trainable. I started the month thinking I needed motivation to focus. Now, I knew I only needed to begin. I started the month believing I was too busy for depth. Now, I knew depth wasn't a luxury. It was a necessity. And all of that came from one decision, repeated 30 times, to give myself 1 hour, no matter what. Some days were messy, some were magical, most were just ordinary. But that's what made the transformation real. It wasn't built on inspiration, It was built on consistency. I didn't need perfect conditions. I just needed to show up. And the longer I showed up, the more I noticed something unexpected. My sense of identity was changing. I no longer introduced myself, even in my mind, as someone who gets distracted easily. I didn't feel like the person who bounced from idea to idea, or the one who couldn't sit still. I felt like someone anchored. Someone who could choose where to place his mind. Someone who didn't have to respond to every ping, thought, or impulse. That's what 30 hours of undivided attention gave me. Not just better work, but a better sense of self. And that self began to show up in every corner of my life. I became more patient in conversations, more deliberate in how I spent my time, more willing to say no, not out of obligation, but out of alignment. Because once you experience what it feels like to be truly focused, even for just 1 hour a day, you start to protect that feeling like something sacred. You realize how rare it is, how valuable, how easily stolen by things that don't matter. And that realization reshapes your choices. You no longer open 5 tabs just to get started. You no longer say yes to everything because you fear missing out. You no longer scroll first thing in the morning just to fill silence. You begin to crave the quiet, to lean into it, to trust it. And that's what changed my life the most. Not the amount of work I got done, not the habits I built, but the understanding that silence is not something to escape. It's something to return to. That attention is not something to guard. It's something to give, consciously, like a gift. That time is not something to manage. It's something to honor. And now, even though the 30-day challenge is complete, I know this isn't over. The 1-hour rule is no longer a rule to follow. It's a rhythm I live by. A daily meeting with myself. A space to think, to build, to breathe. It's no longer just an hour. It's a way of being. So if you're wondering whether something as small as 1 hour can really change your life, I'll tell you what I wish someone had told me. Don't underestimate what you can build with 1 hour a day. Don't underestimate what you'll discover in the silence. Don't underestimate who you might become. If you just give yourself the chance to listen. 1 hour, every day. That's all it takes.